Let's talk about the one thing that takes up most of a project manager's time: communication. I mean, we all do it all day long, but for some reason, it's usually the first thing that goes sideways. So today, we're not just going to read from the PMBOK guide. Oh no, we're going to take its dense, kind of academic principles and forge them into a sharp, consultant-grade blueprint for actually managing project communications. This is your guide to building a plan that really works. This quote isn't just some throwaway line. It's the fundamental truth of our job. Communication isn't a soft skill you tack on at the end. It is the central nervous system of any project. And getting this right, it's the difference between a project that flows and one that feels like you're fighting it every single day. That's why having a formal plan isn't optional. It's absolutely essential. And this is the paradox, isn't it? We're all in back-to-back meetings, our inboxes are a complete disaster, yet stakeholders still feel out of the loop and teams are misaligned. Well, here's the secret. Communication without a strategy isn't communication at all. It's just static. It's noise. So the solution isn't to communicate more, it's to communicate with precision and with purpose. To get that kind of precision, we need a roadmap. So here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll really diagnose the complexity of the problem. Then, I'll introduce you to the professional framework that brings order to all that chaos. We'll walk through gathering your raw materials, the inputs, and the analytical tools you'll use to make sense of it all. From there, we'll actually build the blueprint itself, and, this is key, we'll finish up by talking about how to bring that plan to life. Okay, first things first. Before we can even think about building a solution, we have to really respect the problem we're trying to solve. You see, effective project communication is a multidimensional challenge. And trust me, underestimating how complex it is the first step toward failure. Think about your current project for a second. Every single one of these dimensions is in play, whether you realize it or not. The way you update your internal team, that's totally different from how you talk to an external client, right? A formal report for the steering committee needs a whole different level of rigor than a quick, informal chat in the hallway. Each one of these requires a deliberate choice. A one-size-fits-all approach just guarantees you'll be communicating poorly in at least one of these areas. So, to navigate this complex landscape, we need a system. We don't guess. We don't just improvise. We use a professional framework. Project communications management. That's the antidote to communication chaos. It's a structured, repeatable process for making sure the right info gets to the right people at the right time through the right channel. The framework is really built on 3 pillars. Think of it like building a high-performance machine. First, you plan the design. That's your blueprint. Second, you manage the operation. You're executing that plan every single day. And third, you monitor the performance. You check your outputs to make sure it's working, and you tune it up as you go. You just can't have an effective machine without a really solid design to start with. And it's that first step, creating the blueprint, that separates the projects that succeed from the ones that are constantly stumbling. This is where all the strategic thinking happens. Getting this plan phase right makes everything that comes after, the execution and the monitoring, not just easier, but actually possible. Every great strategy starts by gathering the right ingredients. I mean, you can't make a cake with an empty pantry, right? And you definitely can't build a strong communications plan in a vacuum. We've got to collect the raw materials, all the critical data points from our project and our organization that are going to inform every decision we make from here on out. We start with our own high-level project plan. The resource management plan, well, that tells us who is on the team. The stakeholder engagement plan outlines our strategy for keeping the key players involved. Now, a common mistake here is just glancing at these. A real consultant digs deeper and asks, what are the unwritten communication needs that are implied by these roles and strategies? Next, we look at the core project documents. The requirements might tell you about things like mandatory status reports, but the real intelligence? Oh, that lies in the stakeholder register. This is so much more than just a list of names. It's basically a map of the political landscape of your project. It tells you who has influence, who might be skeptical, and who needs to be kept in the loop to become an advocate. It's just invaluable. And finally, no project exists on its own little island. We have to consider the environment it lives in. Think of it this way. EEFs are the rules of the road in your company. The culture, the specific technology you have to use, and OPAs, that's the company toolbox. The templates, policies, and especially the lessons learned from past projects that can stop you from reinventing the wheel and making the same old mistakes.
All right, we've gathered all our intelligence. Now it's time to fire up the analytical engine. We're going to use a specific set of tools and techniques to process all these inputs and transform that raw data into a strategy that's coherent and, most importantly, actionable.
At the heart of our toolkit is this analysis. Now, I know that sounds super formal, so let's just put it in plain English. This is where you play detective. You are systematically figuring out who needs to know what, when, why, and how for every single one of your stakeholders. This isn't guesswork, it's a methodical investigation. As a consultant, these are the kinds of diagnostic questions I'm always asking. How many communication pathways are we actually trying to manage here? What's the real org chart versus the official one? Are there logistical headaches, like different time zones we need to design around? And critically, are there any legal or regulatory landmines related to sharing data that we absolutely cannot step on? A huge strategic choice is how you deliver information. And the key thing here is that it's not about choosing one or the other. It's about building a smart, blended strategy. You push critical, time-sensitive updates directly to people, and you create places where stakeholders can pull detailed data whenever they need it. Using the wrong method creates inbox noise, or even worse, keeps important people in the dark. This matrix right here, this is your secret weapon for influencing stakeholders. It visually pinpoints the exact gaps between where your key stakeholders are right now and where you need them to be for the project to succeed. And what's the number one tool for closing those gaps? You guessed it, targeted strategic communication. This tells you exactly where to aim your efforts. So with all our analysis done, we finally arrive at the main event. We are now ready to move from data and diagnostics to the actual tangible output. It's time to architect the project's central nervous system, the communications management plan. A truly world-class plan answers every single one of these questions without any ambiguity. What info are we sending? Who's responsible for sending it? How often? What tech are we using? It even spells out the escalation path for when things go wrong and a common glossary so everybody's speaking the same language. This isn't some high-level summary. It's a detailed operational playbook for your project. So you can forget all the guesswork and the excuses. This document becomes your project's constitution for communication. It protects the team from confusion, it gets stakeholders aligned on expectations, and it holds everyone accountable for their part in the flow of information. Now, here's a critical insight, and it's where a lot of teams stumble. Creating the plan is not the finish line. A beautiful blueprint that's just locked away in a project folder doesn't build anything. The real value is only unlocked when you activate the plan, turning it from a static document into a dynamic, living guide that shapes the day-to-day rhythm of your project. Remember that three-part machine we talked about? Well, the plan is the engine that drives the other two processes. It gives you the explicit instructions for managing communications. That's the daily work of creating and sending info. And it creates the baseline you use to monitor how effective you are, letting you know if you're on course or if you need to adjust your strategy. At the end of the day, after all the analysis and all the documentation, a great communications plan does one thing exceptionally well. It replaces all that project noise with clarity, and it swaps out ambiguity with real purpose. So the blueprint is now in your hands. This is the professional standard for structuring communication and really driving success. The only question left is, are you ready to stop just managing tasks and start truly architecting your project success through strategic communication?